Welcome back to another Ramblin' folks. It is time to break down some favorite movies of mine, and we are discussing the classic Stripes. Why are we discussing the classic Stripes? Because it hits close to home with me, considering that it is, once again, a team-up of Ivan Reitman, Bill Murray, and Harold Ramis. A power trio who put together some incredible movies back in a previous decade. Stripes came out in 1981 and is an action comedy film directed by Ivan Reitman and starring Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, along with Warren Oates, P.J. Soles, Sean Young, and John Candy. Ramis wrote the film with Len Blum and Dan Goldberg, the latter of whom also served as producer alongside Reitman. It tells the story of a taxi cab driver and his teacher friend who enlisted in the United States Army after realizing that their lives are going nowhere and they're going to need a big change to make it happen. Problem is, one of these, the taxi cab driver, is Bill Murray, so you know there's a lot of snark and hustling behind it. Yep, folks. The man that is Peter Venkman was prototyped in a lot of previous Bill Murray work, and that is what we are seeing here. John Winger. In the course of one day, Louisville, Kentucky cab driver John Winger loses his job, his apartment, his car, and his girlfriend Anita, who is growing tired of his immaturity. Deciding to join the Army, he persuades his best friend Russell Ziske, a vocational ESL teacher, to join as well. Besides the aforementioned actors, we also have John Larroquette, Conrad Dunn, Judge Reinhold, Joe Flaherty, Dave Thomas, not the Wendy's guy, Timothy Busfield, and Bill Paxton in some of the earliest roles in their career, and the film score was composed by Elmer Bernstein. Upon arrival, they meet their fellow recruits and their drill sergeant, Sergeant Hulka. John irritates Hulka with his slacker attitude, and he and Russell become romantically involved with MPs Louise Cooper and Stella Hansen. Thus you have your setup for the comedy. John Winger trying to hustle his way through the Army, putting as little effort as possible in while still getting maximum results, while Sergeant Hulka tries to make a proper soldier and man out of Winger. Ramis playing the straight man. It is actually really fascinating to see how the two differing characters approach their romancing of the MPs, providing a nice contrast and reminding you that friends do not have to be carbon copy personalities of each other. Russell eventually catches John attempting to desert after one too many punishments from Hulka and stops him, angrily reminding John that it was his idea they both enlist. One of the great scenes of the movie, though, comes as we get to the end of the training period and the cusp of graduation, when Hulka's platoon sneak off base and end up at a mud wrestling bar. Now, this isn't something you're going to find in a lot of places in 2025, if anywhere, at least here in America, but again, you're talking about the early 80s, it was a thing. The idea being that people would pay to see beautiful women in very little amounts of clothing wrestling in mud. And occasionally, if they pay enough money, wrestling the women in the mud. Which is what happens when John Candy's character of Ox is conned into participating in the mud wrestling by the rest of his Army platoon buddies. I'm not going to go too deep into the scene because It does feature John Candy at some of his physical comedy best. All I will tell you is that the women attempt to beat him with numbers. However, the ox will not be denied. Ultimately, MPs and police raid the club when things get out of hand. The female MP, Stella and Louise, help John and Russell escape before returning to base, but not the rest of the platoon, and having some intimate encounters. The rest of the platoon, however, instead got reprimanded by Commanding Officer Captain Stillman, played by John Larroquette, who threatens to report them to the base commander and make them repeat basic training. John steps up, and they do an all-night cram session where they manage to pull off an unorthodox drill display that, again, needs to be seen. I cannot do this scene justice, but it is one of the iconic scenes of 80s comedies and this movie. Highly recommend. Impressed by learning that they completed their training without a drill sergeant, as Holka was injured earlier in the movie. The platoon is signed to a secret project in Italy. Things go bad when John and Russell decide to visit Stella and Louise, who are stationed in West Germany with a different unit. Stillman decides to go on an unauthorized mission to retrieve the men and a classified urban assault vehicle that John and Russell use to get to Germany. Unfortunately, Stillman, driving in the dark and refusing to listen to the rest of the platoon, being a very proud man, gets the platoon into Czechoslovakia. They are arrested. John, Russell, Stella, and Louise must save the day. More comedy ensues. Again, not going to give you major spoilers because I really want you to watch this movie. If you have never seen this movie before, it is an all-time classic. It is a perfect example of 1980s comedy. I will say, it being a comedy, there is a mega happy ending. Now, where does this all leave us now that we've gone through the quick plot run? Well, as I said, for people that lived through the 80s and the 90s, this movie is chock full of actors and actresses you will recognize, which makes it a fun movie just for the getting to see people who would go on to make great starring movies of their own, learning their way around a major Hollywood comedy movie. For veteran actors like Bill Murray and John Candy, it was them at their best. And a great early example of how they would claim Hollywood after graduating from television. The big thing about this, though, is it was a rare on-screen role for Harold Ramis at the time. He was known primarily for co-writing National Lampoon's Animal House, the previous Bill Murray movies Meatballs and Caddyshack, but was relatively unknown as a film actor. He had previously appeared on television's sketch comedy Second City Television, which he had quit a few years earlier. Columbia Pictures, who was behind the movie, did not like Ramis's initial audition, but Ivan Reitman told the studio that he was hiring the comedian anyway. This is the kind of appreciation and tapping potential that would lead to these gentlemen working on Ghostbusters a few years later. Ramis was reluctant to appear in the film, but Murray told Ramis he did not wish to work with anyone else and would leave the film unless he played the other principal character. The initial idea was conceived by Ivan Reitman, his one-sentence pitch being Cheech and Chong join the army. Len Blum and Dan Goldberg initially wrote the screenplay and read it to Reitman, who in turn would give the writers notes, leading to the collaboration. Cheech and Chong's manager was not able to negotiate because the comedy duo wanted complete creative control. This is when Reitman suggested changing the characters to suit Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, figuring if they could interest Ramis and let him tailor the script, he would convince Murray to do it. Hence, circling back around, Columbia Pictures not believing in Ramis, but Murray and Reitman backing him. This is how comedy groups are formed, folks. Reitman knew if Ramis would get on board, he would bring Bill Murray in. Bill Murray brings the star power. Once Bill Murray's in, ain't no way he's going to do it without Harold Ramis being right there with him, because that's how it goes. It's a circle of support. Sean Young was cast based on her looks, which were already getting her a lot of appeal in the 80s, and Reitman felt that her sweet demeanor would go well with Harold Ramis' character. PJ Soles eventually got the role of the other MP after she tested with Murray and they got along well together. Because that's the thing a lot of people forget when they make movies where you have folks falling in love with each other, is the better the chemistry the actors have, the less acting effort they have to put into it. Thus, the more natural and organic it all comes off, which is good for a successful movie. This means everything is good. As far as the movie's initial financial success, Stripes was released on June 26, 1981 and grossed $1,892,000 on opening day. Placed fifth overall for the weekend with $6,152,166,000, eventually grossing $85,297,000 in North America, making it the fifth most popular 1981 film at the US and Canadian box office. Now, this is all against a budget of $9 to $10 million. So you have a box office of $85.3 million versus a budget of $9 to $10 million. Yeah, even with marketing adding to the cost, that is profit. That is a great profit margin. That makes studios happy. Stripes was also well received by critics and audiences. On Rotten Tomatoes, the movie has an approval rating of 88% based on 41 reviews. The website's critical consensus reads, a raucous military comedy that features Bill Murray and his merry cohorts approaching the peak of their talents. Metacritic has a weighted average score of 68 out of 100 based on 14 critics. Roger Ebert praised it as an anarchic slob movie, a celebration of all that is irreverent, reckless, foolhardy, undisciplined, and occasionally scatological. It's a lot of fun. Janet Maslin of the New York Times called it a lazy but amiable comedy and praised Murray for achieving a sardonically exaggerated calm that can be very entertaining. Again, something that would quickly become a trademark of Murray's film characters. Gary Arnold, in his review for the Washington Post, wrote that Stripes squanders at least an hour belaboring situations contradicted from the outset by Murray's personality. The premise and star remain out of whack until the rambling, diffuse screenplay finally struggles beyond basic training. Not the best review. Time wrote that Stripes will keep potential felons off the streets for 2 hours. Few people seem to be asking these days that movies do more. And not the best review, but hey, at least they admitted there was a point to the movies. The movie has seen release on Laserdisc, VHS, and DVD formats. The DVD format that came out in 2005 includes an extended cut that runs about 18 minutes longer than the classic theatrical cut. Those 18 minutes come through with expansion on several scenes and included an excise subplot in which Winger and Ziski go AWOL by stowing away on a Special Forces paratrooper mission after taking hits of LSD, believing it was Dramamine. They become lost in jungle and are captured by Spanish-speaking guerrillas, before Winger saves the day by singing the chorus of Tito Rodriguez's Cuando, 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 winning over the captors. Again, you can see where that scene was not needed. Fun, but not necessary. Other deleted scenes include a longer sequence of Winger talking Ziski into joining the army with him, Captain Stillman being called out as a liar by Winger, who blames another officer for his neglect in the incident that injured Hulka, Hulka giving everyone but John and Russell the weekend off, while assigning them to guard duty, explaining that his only reason for doing so is that he doesn't like John. And scenes of John Winger being told that platoon members don't like him, which is alright because, again, not necessary, and the way they handled it with the last minute cram session where Winger is called out for being a little irritating, but ultimately wins over the platoon by guiding them through their cram session successfully, makes for a better plot. In January 2012, the extended cut of the film was released on Blu-ray. Now, again, what does this all mean in the long run? Where does the movie fall in Hollywood movie history? Well, as I've said, if you're a fan of Bill Murray and the Peter Venkman character, you are going to want to watch Stripes. You will see a lot of the same personality traits that would show up 3 years later in Ghostbusters. If you're a fan of Meatballs, which we have discussed and reviewed before, and which came out a couple years before, you are going to want to see Stripes. If you're a fan of Caddyshack, which also came out around this same time, was part of Murray's 80s dominance. You know what? To be fair, Murray wasn't even the main character in that movie. He stole every scene he was in. And they are vastly different characters, but if Murray's character made you laugh and you're not familiar with his library, yeah, go ahead and watch Stripes. Throw on Meatballs while you're at it. The film is, in many ways, a sign of what was to come in the 80s. It set a lot of comedy standards, got a lot of comedians up on the big screen where they would get more and more roles, and proved that any film, no matter what the initial script pitch turned out as, because remember it was originally supposed to be Cheech and Chong, when handled by highly talented professionals, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, can become glory. Stripes is not one of those movies that I consider like my personal favorite. I'm never going to angrily argue with anybody over whether Stripes is a good movie. But it is a perfect comfort movie. When you want to watch the kind of comedy whose plot is nicely thin, you know, just it's like good deli meat, just thin enough that nice, just, you know, where there is a plot to run things and push scenes along, but you don't have to spend a lot of time paying attention, even if it's your first time watching it, because you're tired, it's a long day of work, maybe it's your day off and your brain's still fried and recovering from work. Stripes is there for you. if you want to be reminded that no matter how serious the military is in real life, and, I have all the respect in the world for soldiers, what they do. But if you're the kind of person that realizes, hey, in a nicely fictional setting, anything can become comedy fodder, and we should all be able to laugh at ourselves. Hey, Stripes is great. There are movies that have done worse to make the military look bad than Stripes. Or if you're a fan of many of these other actors we named, Judge Reinhold and John Candy are personal favorites of mine. Go see the movie. Harold Ramis, may he rest in peace. This was a great example of how you took a guy who was a great writer, had good comedy timing that he had perfected through sketch comedy and on stage in front of live audiences, found his comfort zone so he could go on to do famous characters and become a regular cameo actor in later years. This is a great movie. It's not going to change your world. It's not going to sit there and make you completely change your mind about any major socio-political issues. Probably won't even make you change your mind about whether or not any of these people are great comedians. But if you already enjoy their comedy, if you enjoy the idea of army-based comedy, or as I said, you just want something you can half pay attention to while you close your eyes and catch your breath after a busy day, Stripes is there for you. In a lot of ways, I think that's why I love so many 80s comedies. The 90s brought back a big amount of slapstick and high energy to comedy. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do love me some 90s comedies too. A lot of the 80s stood out because it relied on the talent of the comedians to make a solid script seem organic and the comedy behind it easy. There's a lot of snark. There's a lot of heart and charm. And there's a lot of, these are just characters you would love to hang out in a bar and buy some drinks for, interacting with each other in a completely believable way. And that's one of those things that I think we all need to be reminded of sometimes. That's how simple comedy can be. Find charming personalities and let them play off each other. In the meantime and in between time, though, I hope you enjoyed the movie. If you've already seen it and are a big fan of it, I hope you feel like I did a good job of selling it to people who have not seen it. Comment if you want to. Keep an eye out for the next video, because we do ramble. When we ramble, it's going to be on a Friday. You can always guarantee that. And in the end, as I always say, we are here to enjoy entertainment for what it is. That's why we do not bring the hate. So stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe, and thank you for watching.